All right, folks. Apparently, the day after I put out the video about China already owning the AI revolution, um, it turned out to be quite prescient. I missed it yesterday, but I saw today that apparently the news broke yesterday that the five big tech conglomerates in China, like Tencent and Baidu, and I forget the name. I should learn the name of all these Chinese companies. I forget them, but anyway. They apparently collectively have put in an order with Nvidia for $5 billion in graphics cards. And this is, of course, to participate in the AI revolution. Now, one would think that, just from a conventional wisdom standpoint, if you'd look at Nvidia's stock after this announcement that the Chinese are buying $5 billion in graphics cards. Remember, the most expensive graphics card costs what? It's stupid, but it's like consumer. Well, actually, I don't know what their high-end ones do. I guess they probably make some that are like $100,000. So maybe $5 billion doesn't actually buy you that much with Nvidia these days. But anyway, at the very least, this should be bullish for their stock, right? I mean, that's a big order. That's a big deal. The Chinese getting involved and wanting to buy up your stock. Or not your stock of goods, not your stock of shares, to be clear. Yet, when you look at the chart, Nvidia's down 15% off the highs from a month ago. They just set a ridiculous all-time high of like $480 in July. Now in August, they're down to $408. And I had not looked at Nvidia's stock. I had not been following it. I had heard that they made an all-time high not too long ago, but before I said what I said on Wednesday, I did not look at how they've been doing lately. And yet, despite all this great news for them about how AI is booming, they've fallen 15% off of that all-time high. And from what I've seen, the chartists, and you got to take technical analysis with a grain of salt always, because it's not really. We don't really understand why technical analysis works. It just kind of tends to work. The chart is not looking good for Nvidia. And even if you don't want to believe the charts, on August 9th, which today is the 11th, right? So 10th was yesterday. On the day I made my video about AI, Jim Cramer wholeheartly recommended buying Nvidia stock. And that's always the kiss of death for anyone. I think what the headline from CNBC is that Jim Cramer says that Nvidia's near tripling in their stock price could be just the beginning. And so when Jim Cramer says it's time to buy Nvidia, you know it's time to turn short. I mean, he's the modern day Gartman. Remember that chart that Zero Hedge put out a few years ago, which ultimately led to Dennis Gartman just hanging up his keyboard and retiring for good. It was just a chart of markets and what Gartman recommended at various times, and it showed every time that you would see essentially a dip in a bottom in a stock, or even just like the S&P. I forget what they were using. It was probably just the S&P they were using as a proxy. They would show a bottom form, and there would be a little annotation, and it would say Gartman shorts. And so meaning Gartman shorted the market at the bottom, at the exact bottom. And then it went back up. And you would see it would reach another peak. And right at the peak, it would say, it would an annotation. It would say Gartman covers. So Gartman finally covered his shorts. And then it drops again. And then it would, once it gets to the bottom, there's Gartman shorts. They'd go back up. Gartman covers. And it was just that for like a year. And so that, I think Jim Cramer is a much more well-known phenomenon than Dennis Gartman ever was. People who have never heard of Dennis Gartman know that Jim Cramer is always wrong, and that whenever he recommends you buy something, you need to do the opposite. And so that's what people have been doing. And Nvidia's stock is suffering because of it. So let's try and square that circle. We know it's not all because of Jim Cramer. I mean, Jim Cramer didn't recommend Nvidia until Wednesday, when they were already pretty well off. I'm sure at that point they were more than 10% off of their all-time highs. So they were they're still not in bear market territory, but they're certainly well into correction territory, over 10%. And it looks like they're breaking through support. And so, I mean, there's still a chance that they recapture the moving average. I'm not coming here to say, hey, it's a great idea to short Nvidia right this second. I'm not giving you investment advice. I don't take my own investment advice because I don't give any investment advice. I'm not a swing trader by any means. All I know is that I look at the news and I see nothing but good news for Nvidia and AI. But you look at Wall Street, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And so I think this actually has to do, I've been dancing around the topic, I think this has to do with what I was talking about on Wednesday. Sure, there was this big ramp up in Nvidia stock. But then people started to consider the risks. And that's what's happening. Risk is being priced into Nvidia stock. Sure. Is Nvidia worth $480 a share? If everything goes as, as Jensen would hope, Jensen, the CEO, that with that ridiculous leather jacket that he waddles around in, yeah, maybe Nvidia is worth $480 a share if everything he says is true. But there's a good chance that old Jensen gets blindsided by geopolitics. And the worst case scenario is, of course, Chinese invasion of Taiwan, which would absolutely cripple his business. Nvidia would be bankrupt overnight. China invades Taiwan, Nvidia goes bye-bye, along with pretty much the entire U.S. semiconductor market. Would their designs and things die off? No. Would their technology fade away? No. But the whole industry would have to be consolidated, and someone would have to come in and buy them up. Someone who is not, who will essentially have dry powder because they're not exposed to Taiwan. I don't know who that is. I mean, I don't think it would be Tesla and Elon Musk. I don't know. Maybe Elon Musk. Well, no, he doesn't. He doesn't have it. He doesn't have liquid assets. He has Tesla stock. That's what he would need to put up to buy any of this stuff. So, I mean, even one of the world's richest men, he's not going to be able to buy it. Maybe Bezos. I talked about the risks for Microsoft. I don't know how much of Bill Gates' wealth is still tied up in Microsoft. He's probably pretty well diversified. I'm sure that Bill Gates has probably positioned himself so that he could make quite a bit of money in the case of World War III. So, yeah, I guess Bill Gates could buy up Nvidia and control the AI revolution, at least in the West. As far as AMD and Intel is concerned, who knows? Anyway, if the Chinese invade Taiwan, they will seize TSMC, they will nationalize it, and that's Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. And along with it, if they're manufacturing all of these chips for the likes of Intel, AMD, Nvidia, Texas Instruments, what have you, they don't need old Jensen. They don't need to pay him for his intellectual property. TSMC will have everything on record, and China will be able to just produce chips based on the existing Nvidia architecture, and then use that as the basis to try and develop their own domestic GPU industry, which I think I also talked about on Wednesday. And so I don't want to repeat myself because this is a different video. I'm not trying to just rehash what I said before. What I'm trying to say is that what I talked about on Wednesday, I think, is being priced in. I think that the market is starting to recognize that risk, the very real risk, that this whole AI shindig, that this party could come to a very abrupt end. And China, once they control these chips, sure, will they be able to develop them and advance them at the same rate in which, AMD and Nvidia will? Sure, they won't, or no, they won't be able to. Their domestic semiconductor industry is not going to be able to. They're far behind. It's that simple. It'll take them time to catch up. But in the meantime, they will have the pure processing power of all these chips, and even if they're not as powerful, because Nvidia and AMD develop, more advanced architectures that are more efficient, China doesn't care. They'll burn more coal. They will have the raw, they'll just keep producing more and more of these chips. They will beat us with quantity over quality. Sure, maybe we'll have, RDNA 7 and whatever the latest Nvidia, 60 series. Maybe we'll have those designs on paper, but we in America won't have access to them. We won't be able to produce them, and so therefore we won't actually have any hardware with which to develop artificial intelligence. And sure, China might be stuck, with the 40 series architecture 5 years from now. But hey, they can just produce more and more of them, use more and more electricity, and continue to push the project along. As we've seen in the past, you don't necessarily need to create a more powerful single chip. You can just have more of them. That's why in the past you've seen dual CPU sockets and SLI graphics card setups where you have two graphics cards that are working together to essentially be one graphics card that has double the power. And so sure, let's say that in a couple of years, Nvidia comes out with the RTX 5090, and it's 5% faster than an RTX 4090, which, given the current rate of advancement every generation that we see out of Nvidia, that probably would be a pretty accurate estimate, a 5% increase. China's not going to care. They'll be very happy producing their 4090 chips or whatever the high-end one. I don't know what the name of the high-end AI, AI tier graphics cards that Nvidia makes. Whatever those chips are, China will just mass produce them. They will throw them into, AI hatcheries, as I talked about, across the country. They will throw cheap coal-fired electricity at them. They'll cool them, with the running water of the Yellow River, and they'll develop an AI so smart that it will enslave the entirety of the West and we won't even know it. By the time that happens, what's your Nvidia stock going to be worth to anybody? In time, the Chinese will have had enough time to catch up to where Nvidia was, and then start to develop and progress and develop new architectures. And then what little edge the West had in terms of design and intelligence, technological advancement, all that will be gone. And the Chinese will have both the manufacturing power, the technical prowess, and the artificial general intelligence, which will then quickly escalate to artificial superintelligence, which will be able to create its own hardware. It will invent new hardware to make itself smarter. And by that point, everyone will have long forgotten about anyone named Mr. Jensen, or the fact that some bald schmuck named Jim Cramer recommended that you buy Mr. Jensen's stock. Nvidia had a good run, but as we've seen with far more respectable, far more legendary, and far more dominant and competent companies in the past, just because they have over 80% market share right now, that does not mean that they will forever. They can lose that very quickly and ultimately become a footnote in history. Most people my age have never seen an IBM PC. Think about that. IBM invented the PC. Everything that we have today that is a PC, including the computer that I use, a Lenovo, which is the direct descendant of IBM, all of this came from IBM. And yet, eventually, IBM just had to give up on the market entirely. Now, IBM still exists as a company, but the way that IBM returned to profitability was not by producing things that people wanted. It was by enforcing their own intellectual property claims and going after everyone. Because IBM had invented so many things that were integral to computing, they were able to just go around and send letters to people who were using who were infringing upon IBM patents and saying, hey, actually that really ubiquitous thing that your product has integrated into it and is integral to your product working, that's actually something that infringes on an IBM patent, and you need to pay us money. And that's what IBM did. They just went around and nickel and diming everyone, and eventually they achieved profitability. They sold off their PC division to the Chinese, and eventually their own CPU architecture went open source. PowerPC is now open source. IBM just gave it up because it's not getting them anywhere. And PowerPC is something that certainly was very relevant during my lifetime. All your Macs were PowerPC machines. And then the 7th generation video game consoles, the Wii, the Xbox 360, the PS3. They were all PowerPC machines with, I believe, all three of them, ATI graphics. Another name that disappeared. ATI, a company much older than Nvidia. Now again, ATI and their history live on because they were absorbed into AMD. They didn't just disappear entirely. But if Nvidia was absolutely crippled by World War III and the end of Taiwan, and Microsoft purchases Nvidia in bankruptcy, and all of their products kind of live on and they continue to be developed, but they're under the Microsoft name, and now you're getting the Microsoft Bill Gates force, BTX 10,000, and it's announced by Bill Gates, who comes out on the stage wearing a leather jacket, dancing to that cringy song from Windows 95. If all that happens, is anyone going to say that Nvidia is what is relevant anymore? Are all those people who bought Nvidia stock, are they going to be feeling too good about themselves? Even though they lost all their money, the assets of the company that they invested in, and essentially, and had to take a haircut. Well, at least the technology lives on. Well, no, of course technology lives on. Technology always lives on. How many times has Colt Patent Firearms gone into bankruptcy, been sold, been reorganized? The 1911 lives on. The Single Action Army lives on. Those technologies were invented. They're popular. They're useful. God willing, they will never go away. We will always have Colt 45s, even if we don't have Colt. But that doesn't mean it's a good idea to buy Colt stock. In fact, you can't even buy Colt stock anymore. It's such a small little rump of a brand. I don't even know who owns it. Same with Winchester. I mean, Winchester was bought by the Japanese way back when, I think. I know they're made in Japan. I can't remember if they're... I think they're owned by the Japanese, though. Maybe Howa bought Winchester. Anyway, there have been companies way more ubiquitous and seemingly unstoppable than Nvidia, who went on fairly quickly after their zenith and their meteoric rise to crash and burn. I don't even have to bring up pets.com. So, with that said, I think we have been a week now, so I can say it. With that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.